Hello history buffs, my name is Chloe Eastwood, I'm a public historian, and today I want to talk about the museum scene from Black Panther. This scene ties in really well thematically with the last set of videos I did on National Treasure. National Treasure talks about new accessions and what do you do with new and provenance antiquities and cultural inheritors and who gets to tell stories and what museums should do for which publics. And this is a really important theme to talk about, but it doesn't get at some of the institutional problems that you get in older museums that have been collecting for a really long time before modern ethical codes were developed. So that's where I want to talk about in Black Panther, where different ethical guidelines were used when accessioning certain elements of their collection. In this case, an unprovenance antiquity from Wakanda. This is another film that we studied in public history class, but as you can see from Janet behind me, I do appreciate Marvel as a franchise. The premise of Wakanda is that it's the only African nation to never be colonized, and as such, it is characterized by isolationism, militarism, long peace, technological advancement, and having a lot of a very precious mineral called vibranium. The main storyline takes place in Wakanda, but has subplots on 3 different continents. For the purposes of this video, Black Panther resolves when T'Challa goes to the United Nations and says that he'll give aid to less fortunate countries like California. This resolution is in sharp contrast to the way that Wakandan antiquities were treated by the British art museums earlier in the film. To recap the scene real quickly, Killmonger calls a curator in to explain a few pieces to him, and she identifies a few pieces correctly, and then she misidentifies something from Wakanda. He explains that he'll be taking it off her hand, and she is justifiably alarmed that it's not for sale and he can't have it. He quips that it wasn't as if her ancestors paid a fair price either, and he steals it from her, and just for good measure, to show that he's the villain, he poisons her on the way out. 2 things stand out to me about this scene. First is Killmonger's justifiable outrage, and the second is the curator's ignorance about things that are in the collection. In my last video, I made it clear that I think that history belongs to the cultural inheritors, and if it's shared with the rest of the world, it's shared voluntarily. Cultural inheritors will always have stronger ties to history than anyone else, and this is shown in the curator not knowing anything about this piece. If the authority to tell the story and to interpret this collection were shared, the museum would be able to put together stronger and more compelling exhibits. Returning stolen treasures is the only respectful choice. We live with museums which have not always practiced ethical collecting, at least not to the standards we hold ourselves now. And the legacy of such practices is that the relationship between the West and other nations who have had their legacies stolen by the West, the relationship can be pretty tense. Repatriation and respecting cultural authority and cultural autonomy of other nations is an important step to healing relationships between 2 peoples. The problem is that a lot of Western museums don't do this, especially the older ones, some of which are famous for their stolen collections, and it can feel like the damage is already done. Now, Killmonger is a villain, but he's an interesting villain because he brings up some really important points. For people like me who grew up with encyclopedic museums, they feel like the perfect place to keep antiquities from all over the world. I grew up with pieces from Peru and Egypt and China, and it felt pretty normal to me to see those things in my museums in the United States. Museums accession items with the intent on keeping them in perpetuity. This is expensive, this is time-consuming, and if you have something that's one of a kind from very, very far away, it's a big draw to bring people into the museum. Between accessioning an item and caring for it, one can feel a real sense of ownership and entitlement to an item, even if it's not from your country. It can feel like a real loss of an investment to send it back overseas. And I'll just say, I love encyclopedic museums. I love being able to learn about history from all over the world. I love it, and I don't think that anyone is at fault for resonating with something from another culture. I think that that is phenomenal. I think that everyone should have the opportunity to do this. But that's the key. I think that everyone should have the opportunity to do this, and we have to ask which people get this opportunity. Is it just the Westerners, or is it everybody? Encyclopedic museums are a Northwest Hemisphere. I'm trying not to cry, this is really sad. Encyclopedic museums are a Northwest Hemisphere phenomenon. There are museums around the world which are empty. There are museums that are full of fabrications because other places don't have special, one-of-a-kind items to put in their museums because their legacy was stolen from them. And that's not okay. I love going to museums to learn about other cultures, but items that were stolen or looted or sold under duress don't belong in these collections. They belong back at home. There's a lot of resentment in the museum world between the West and other cultures because there are so many items which have yet to be repatriated, some of them famously so. One of the essential themes of Black Panther is that you can make a difference by reaching out and trying to make things right. Ethical collecting should be practiced moving forward, but there are also ways to fix past wrongs. Part of the cultural legacy of the West is that we stole culture from all over the world, but if we own it, we can fix it. This might sound pretty radical, but I would love to live in a world where there was enough good faith built up between museums that we could loan our collections to each other and know that they would be returned. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Let me know in the comments what you think about repatriation and ethical collecting. And until next time, make history.